this Zohar. And then the other reason, we spoke about two reasons. One, that that we follow the first or the top. That's the first one, and another one is that we follow the one that's the one that's mashpia in this case, because there's a skalus of chesed and gvura together. And that's the main reason, but the other reason is also necessary to be able to teach us this point about the hiskalus of chesed and gvura. That's why it's necessary to have both reasons together. Not just he's bringing the first reason of the philosophers to negate it, but to show us this idea about how we can have hiskalus, that even in something that seems to be a negative, something that the Torah negates, there's also a positive thing that we learn out, which is also the inner meaning of the reason why all things in Torah, which are only a havamina of Torah, we also say that this is part of Torah's emes, because this is something that has something positive and has something that we could learn out and something in that as well. So now the Rebbe is going to take this idea of hiskalus and the intermingling that we find between chesed and gvura and so on, and apply it in other things, including to the idea of Mashiach's times. But first we're going to apply it to what it speaks about in Mamorim following this Maimer in Likutei Torah. So he says, V'hinei Mamorim shalach rizeh, and the Mamorim following this Maimer in Likutei Torah of Ish Tazriya V'yolda Zachar Mevur Inyan Hamila V'achasana. It's explained the idea of the Bris Milah, and it speaks about also the idea of the Chasana. So the Rebbe explains what is the significance that the Mamorim afterwards explains it. We know that Likutei Torah is literally Likutei Torah. It's collections. It's not that the Maimer of Isha Tazriya was said the same time that the Mamorim following that in Likutei Torah said. It's literally collected Mamorim. It's Mamorim from different eras, different periods, that was collected together on the Parsha, but it could have been said totally different times. So the Rebbe says, regardless of the fact that in time the Alter Rebbe may not have said one after the other, still in all, she says in line 26, since the Likutei Torah was arranged by a Nasi amongst Yidden, the Tzemach Tzedek was the one that collected and shows the different Mamorim of Likutei Torah, Nasi B'doiroi, a Nasi in his generation, Shan Nisias Shaloi, Nisias Nitzchias, that his being a Nasi is not just something that stopped after he passed away and then the Reb Marash became Nasi, it's an everlasting thing. And therefore, therefore his directives and lessons from what he did and what he said are directives and lessons for all generations. This is true even if the Likutei Torah was not a printed sefer, but was like in the old days, a lot of Chassidus was given out in handwriting and manuscripts and copyists, pamphlets and booklets. But Frat, the Rebbe says, this is even more so relevant, that this was the way that the order of the Amorim Likutei Torah were arranged to be printed. Asher kol inyan shebetfus huladoiris. The Frierdiker Rebbe says that anything that's for print is for generations. Something that was said is for a certain amount of time, has less relevance to the later generations. Things that were printed were meant to be there for all time. And therefore, since the Tzemach Tzedek arranged the Mamorim in this particular order in print, so it's understood, Shegam Seder Zehu B'diuk, also the order of the Mamorim, that after speaking in the Maimer Ishu Tazriya V'yolda Zachar, is speaking about the scholars of Gvuras and Chsadim, and then afterwards we follow with a Maimer about Bris Milah and Nisuyin and marriage. It's connected. Top of page ches, avoided the ish only after the perfection and completion of the avoid, of the intermingling of gvuras and chasadim, which is hinted in our pasuk Isha Kisasriya V'Yolda Zachar. That Isha, which we said is the level of gvura of Yira, gives birth to a Zachar, which is the level of Chesed, the level of Ava. And that shows on the intermingling of the two. So we've come afterwards to the level of a bris milah and the idea of marriage. So what's the connection? How do we get from the scholars of Gvuras Chasadim of our Maimer in Hilchot Torah to the following topics of a bris milah and marriage? He says, this world in general is a state of severity, etc., like we see with our senses. Like it's explicit in Eitz Chaim, Tanya, that's brought down in Tanya. The klippos are overpowering it. The reason why klippos are overpowering it, that's all a result of gvura, midas hadin, v'tzimtzum, the constriction, the concealment of Hashem, which is all the midah of gvura. So our world is in general a world of a state of gvuras. Aval. But the very fact that this statement is something that's brought down in Torah, the very fact it's brought down in Torah, Torah is entirely good. Moving so it's understood. Also in this itself, also in the idea that the world is in a state of gvuras must have a matter of good, because Torah is good and Torah is the one that brings it down. He says in line 10, it can move Likutei Torah shop, like it's brought down in Likutei Torah over there, that we find. This idea of the hiskalus, when we're talking about the intermingling of chesed and gvura, so the Alter Rebbe says, someone that withholds the rod, he hates his son. A rod shows on gevura. When he uses the rod, you're saying he loves his son. So you have an action of gevura, you have using the rod, or the threat of the rod, etc. It means severity and discipline. It doesn't have to mean a physical rod. And that is an expression, the gevura is an expression of love. There is an advantage in the rod, that in this severity, in this stringency, in this gevura is included the idea of chesed. Now, in the same way, in our world is externally a world of gevuras, but it's in it and included in it chesed. And through the concealment and covering that we have the gevuras, now we will come to the revelation of the chesed of Mashiach's times. Mashiach's times is about the ultimate state of milah, like it says in the pasuk, that Hashem will circumcise your heart and the heart of your children. Nowadays it says, it's incumbent upon you to circumcise the stopping of your heart. But the ultimate level, it's not just the arlas levavchem, the covering of your heart, that which stops up your heart, but umaltem arlas levavchem, that the very heart itself will go through a bris milah. That's going to happen when Mashiach comes. In other words, the ultimate level of bris milah is when Mashiach comes, when there's going to be the gilui of chesed out of the concealment of gevurah. Perhaps also it could be related to the whole idea of the bris milah, because the bris milah is about revealing and uncovering that which is concealed. The arla is something that covers over, and here we have to reveal the true essence, the true chesed that's there. In a similar vein, the idea of marriage is going to be in its fullest sense when Mashiach comes. The marriage, the marriage of the Yidden Hashem, in its perfect state, in its complete state. That the Navi says that in that day when Mashiach comes, the Hashem will be called my Ish and not just my Baal. Baal is a lower level of marriage, an external level of marriage, similar to the what occurs through the ring. And Ishi is the higher level, not the level of Kiddushin, but the level of Nisuyin that happens through the Chuppah, through Yichud Room, and so on. When Mashiach comes, will be the full marriage, not just the Eidusin. By Matan Torah, it was just the level of Eidusin. It was just the first stage of marriage, the giving of the ring. By Mashiach comes, it's going to be Nisuyin. And then Yichud Ma Ban B'Shlei Musai. Ma and Ban, the two names of the Eibush that we said before, have a level of iskalus. We spoke that even in Ma there's the Ban Sheba Ma, and even in Ban there's the Ma Sheba Ban. But in general, Ma and Ban, that goes on also Kuchabrichu and Shchinte. Ma is usually associated with Zeir Ampin, or in general the spheres of Atzilus. Ban is associated with Malchus, the level of Shechina. So Yichud Ma Ban is also a union and a marriage and a mating of Mashiach's times, in addition to the Yichud Ma'ubans now. Throughout our Avodah now, we're always doing L'Shem Yichud Kuchabrichu Shchinte. We're making a union between the Shechina, which is the Makar and Shams Yisrael and Hashem. We're making a union between Ma'uban. But the perfection of it, the completion of it, the total marriage of it will be when Mashiach comes. And not just will there be a union, a total union between Ma'uban, but there's going to be, like H's Chayla Teres bylaw, it's going to go even higher than Ma. Ad Shem Ban Oil Shem Sag, until Shem Ban goes up to an even higher level. The name Samach, which is a numerical equivalent of Samach Gimel, Lies Ateres bylaw, that now it's going to be the crown over the husband, that Ban is going to be the crown over Shem Ma, because it's going to be connected with Shem Sag. Al Shem Shal Shem Ma, the Shem Ma as her husband, is going to be the crown of Shem Ma. And not only does it go up to the level of Shem Sag, but even a higher level of Ad Sha'oilo L'Shem Ayin Beis, which Chassidus explains, Bechinas Maskil Le'eson HaEzrachi, the level of Maskil Le'eson HaEzrachi. Eson, Chassidus explains, is the level of the hard, ancient level, the tough, the strong, ancient level, which goes on the levels that are higher than, say, the Rishtalshalos. And that's the level of Shem Ayin Beis, that Shem Ban will arise all the way up to make a crown over the Shem Ma, over its husband. Im Kol HaPirushim BeEson HaEzrachi, with all the explanations in the words Eson HaEzrachi, like it's explained in the Maimer of the Frierdiker Rebbe, in the name of the Alter Rebbe, till it goes up to be a crown to Hashem's very essence. Let's see a little bit on the side, on the left side of the page, the commentary that he says. The level of, actually I'll just say it outside, that the level of Shem Ayin Beis has to do with Eson, because Eson has to do with the innermost level of Chachma. That also has to do with Ezrachi, the level that shines. And the level of Shem Ayin Beis will also be going up to a very high level. So Ban will tap into that through the Yichud that it has with Shem Ma, that Shem Ma also has to do with Chachma. Chachma is Koyach Ma. But it gets up to the most highest level. Okay, page test. Goes on, V'hinei hakvuras hanal hu davar sheba'avar. The Rebbe says, in a practical sense, we said Harishayim Goivrim Boy, and there's the Klippus, and in the simple thing that the Rishayim Goivrim Boy means that things are tough in this world. So the Rebbe always wants to, with his speech and with his whatever he says, to bring out how any negativity is not shaykh even now anymore. So he says the gvuris that we said just before, the severity that's taking place in the time these days until Mashiach comes, that's already past. We're done with all gvuris. But now, now that there was already, we went through all types of suffering and affliction, especially these latter generations of the last few generations, that was terrible suffering, especially in the previous generation, in other words, the suffering of the generation of the Holocaust. The Rebbe often uses this pasuk that will not rise twice a tzara. So once we've gone through that terrible situation of the previous generation, it won't happen anything like it ever again. So the gvuris, the Rebbe is saying, we're not with gvuris anymore. We're not dealing anymore with gvuris. How much more so? It will not be more than twice, because of, like we said, it's not just last generation, but there was previous generations to that. There was a lot of tzaras for the Yidden. Betach, and the Rebbe says, surely from now on, it'll be only good and kindness upon Yidden. But when is this in its ultimate state? This true idea of this goodness will be in the coming of Mashiach. Then it will be only good for Yidden. Maskal meaning a Torah, beginning from the idea of Torah, because ein toivel Torah, because the only goodness is Torah. So when Torah is good, or when Torah is revealed, which is goodness, so then that automatically manifests and brings about the goodness in the world. I know, what does this mean, that the ein toivel Torah will be when Mashiach comes? That when Mashiach comes, the Torah will be in a way that's understood and explained and comprehended. The Torah chadash mititesa, it will be like a new Torah. It'll be a new revelation of Torah, especially in the inyanim of the pnimius HaTorah, which up till now were not something that was revealed. It was something that was not understood well. And now when Mashiach comes, it's going to be completely understood. I think the Frierdiker Rebbe once asked the Rebbe Rashab, what's the difference if we learn Chassidus or we don't learn Chassidus now? We anyway don't understand what Chassidus means when it talks about all these lofty levels. So if we don't learn Chassidus, someone that doesn't learn Chassidus, he doesn't know, and someone that learns Chassidus knows. And when Mashiach comes, we're going to learn it and understand it, and the same thing, someone that didn't learn Chassidus is going to learn it and understand it. So what's the difference? So the Rebbe Rashab said, learning Chassidus now is like looking at something through a frosted glass. You don't know exactly what you're seeing, but then afterwards, when you open up the glass, you open up the door, you see, that's what I saw over there behind the frosted glass. That was a word that the Rebbe Rashab told the Frierdiker Rebbe. So in other words, all the things in Chassidus that are now for us unclear and very difficult to comprehend and so on, when Mashiach comes, it'll be in a way of toiv, it'll be in a way of good, it'll be in a way that's understood and clear. And this happens in this goodness in Mashiach's times, which is, like we said, it's the goodness in the physical is a result of the goodness of the spiritual aspect of Torah, comes about befrat, specifically the avodas adam through the avoid of a person in a manner of spreading the well springs of the pnimis HaTorah outward. That the Torah comes in a level that is considered outside. The outside that is outside of the person. That's the first level of chutzah. But also, the Rebbe often explains that chutzah also means v'gam koil chutzah sheba'adam atzmai. Within the person, there's also his outside. What's his outside? The intellect and even the emotions, but mainly the intellect, is like the inner existence of the person. It's not just enough to intellectually understand and know Chassidus, but it has to reach to the most furthest places outside of the person, to his most furthest extremities. Meaning, he has to reach with the Torah and Hafotzas HaMayonos, he has to spread it out, that it should impact his 248 limbs and organs and 365 sinews and blood vessels, arteries, etc. And higher than that type of chutzah, a more inner chutzah, because he's working his way outside in. First of all, there's the chutzah outside of the person. Then there's the chutzah being the person's organs and limbs. Then ulamailam is even higher than the organs and limbs. B'machshava dibur ha'maisa in his thought, speech, and deed, that it permeates all of those parts. The mayonis permeates them as well. Ulamailam is midas shabai, that it permeates also his emotions. That we don't want just something to remain intellectually, but that the person through his meditation and understanding should affect his emotions as well. That also to affect his intellect. So who is affecting his intellect? So the Rebbe is going to explain, there is the person and then there's the intellect. Let's explain the Torah close to the beginning. Also, the 10 koiches of the soul are not the soul itself. The very essence of the soul is united with the very essence of Hashem. It's an interesting contrast, because if you look in Tanya, the expression about the Eser Koiches HaNefesh is called the Atzmusa Mehusa of the soul. He calls the Eser Koiches HaNefesh. But look at the Torah, the Alter Rebbe is very clear in the famous Maimer Bir Lesaj Bis Melech, that's on Parshas Vayikra, almost at the beginning of look at the Torah, that he explains that no, there's the essence of the soul that's higher than even the Eser Koiches HaNefesh. So therefore, there is the essence of the soul's connection with Hashem. There has to be the Hafotzas HaMayonos chutzah, that I'm taking that essence, that connection with Hashem, and I'm making sure to expand it and spread it chutzah into my intellect, into my emotions, until it goes outside into the world. Through this, we all come to the true and complete redemption. You will be collected one by one, the Bnei Yisrael. Everything that we want to affect when Mashiach comes has to do with our avodah now, the Rebbe says. So since in general he said, learning Torah now affects the goodness of Torah of Mashiach's time, and since the goodness of Mashiach's times will be the collection of every single Yid, so by learning parts of Torah that are also about collecting and gathering together, that affects the gathering together of Klal Yisrael. For example, like studying the Likutei Torah, which we said is collections of different mamarim. Similar to you will collect one by one the Bnei Yisrael. And in a similar vein, in a similar vein, that studying Rambam, because as the Rambam said, his Sefer is a collection of the halachas throughout the entire Torah Sheba'al Peh. Also, the study of Mishnayos that Rabbeinu HaKadosh compiled, that it's also a collection that he took from the writings of the different recordings of the different halachas and put them together. And to note, to note that the beginning of the second Perek of Pirkei Avos that we're learning this Shabbos, that was the Shabbos that the Rebbe said this Maimer, is in the statement of Rabbeinu HaKadosh, Rabbi Yomer. So again, Rebbe is brought into the situation. And when Aideza, through doing all of these things, Boim al Kima Yid, we come through a fulfillment of the promise. Meheir Hashem Elkeinu Yishama Yehuda, speedily Hashem Elkeinu will make it heard in the cities of Yehuda, etc. Shmias Chamisha Koilos, Chasn v'Kala, the hearing of the 5 sounds of the Chasn and Kala, Shekonnect Chamisha Koilos Shvem Nitna Torah, they correspond to the 5 different sounds that it's explained that we find was by Har Sinai. It says Vayikoil Ubrokim Van Kavod Al Hor Vayikoil Shofar Vayikoil Shofar Valkim Yana Bekoil. So we have 5 times Koil, just like it says Kol Sosin, Kol Simcha, Kol Chosin, Kol Kala. It says 5 times Koil. Top of the last page. V'yikuyim Mashakosov Kol Gali Yeshuva Hein. It'll be fulfilled what it says. A great congregation will return here. Loidak B'lashon Asid Al B'lashon Avar. Not just that in the future it will happen, but this will be in the past tense. Shekvar Bo Heinu. They already came here. V'gam Mashakosov Torah Chadash U'Mitetesi. Also where it says a new Torah will come out from me. B'lashon Avar. That it's not just it will come, but it did come. Shekvar Yotz. It already came. And the main thing is, Shiyah calls it take from me on Mamish Bagol should be immediately, speedily, the way we understand quickly.